Guys, it's Vinny, and I don't know if you remember, but I'm here to talk about cowards, specifically those who commit suicide. Wait a minute. Actually, I'm here to prove that wrong. In my last video, I presented you with the individuals who most often commit suicide. Young, white males, and young, trans, or gender non-conforming, non-heterosexual individuals. Today, I'm going to talk about young white men and how a failed society ultimately fosters an environment which encourages suicidal ideation. So, let's talk about childhood. It's the most important stage that has the greatest impact on one's development and behavior. It's why we teach children right from wrong, so that they can learn to better effectively control their behaviors. So let's talk about boys. At a very young age, boys are often taught very unhealthy coping mechanisms. For example, when a boy is in distress, he may want to cry or reach out to others. But that is often discouraged. In fact, in worst cases, a boy might be belittled or even punished for trying to reach out. They hear phrases such as man up or don't be a pussy and other like-minded rhetoric that implies that being vulnerable makes one lesser or incompetent. Also, it's key not to sidestep on the casual sexism in these phrases. Gendering self-help and demonizing self-soothing and nurturing by labeling them as feminine not only teach boys, but they teach everyone that being unmasculine isn't strong. By the way, emotions are genderless. Everybody has them. And emotional regulation is something that we all need to practice in order to function at our best. Well, what kind of coping skills are there? Well, there are hundreds, and they're in different categories such as adaptive, avoidant, behavioral, cognitive, compensative, and just so many others. Now, the ones that are most commonly taught to boys are the ones that are in the attack, defensive, and avoiding classifications. One of the most encouraged forms of coping for boys is physical activity, which is an avoidance style. Now, that is not to say that avoidance is necessarily bad. However, the purpose of avoidance is to give oneself time. This allows you to tackle the issue later once you are fully recharged. But for boys, later is rarely teased out. So when they're finally able to sit with their problems, what does society teach them to do? We teach boys to be the best, to be the most dominant, and essentially, we're teaching boys that cognitive distortions are healthy. No one person can be these things. So we're just setting them up for failure. So how are we teaching boys to handle failure? Because it's going to be inevitable. And teaching someone how to handle their failure is probably the most important thing that you can teach them. But you see, that's the problem. Hyper-masculinity doesn't leave any room for failure. Essentially, in its essence, it is the propping up of physical strength at the cost of emotional strength. If a boy isn't allowed to talk or even acknowledge his emotions, he's going to become unaware of his emotions. It's often mistaken that people see bottling up feelings as peak mental health. But the problem being is this is, again, avoidance. If you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable, you won't develop healthy coping skills. As a result, here are some of the unhealthy coping mechanisms that may form as a replacement for strength. Self-medicating, using drugs or alcohol as a means to escape from one's issues. Isolation, cutting off ties with loved ones physically and emotionally. Oversleeping, using sleep in order to avoid facing one's responsibilities. Ignoring/avoidance, a variety of methods that ultimately distracts the individual from pressing matters, for example, overscheduling, fantasy play, etc. Passive aggressiveness, an indirect expression of aggression that avoids healthy communication. Blaming/outbursts, lashing out verbally or emotionally on others with the intent to hurt or intimidate. Now we're ready to talk about suicide. Why would a young white male reach this point? In society, he benefits from the most privilege, he has access to the most forms of help, and he's even perceived as the most competent. But suicide is a reaction to stress, making it a coping mechanism in the self-harm category. Because suicide is a means to escape pain, and this makes it the most deadly of coping mechanisms. But sometimes, the most maladaptive of individuals can compensate if they have a great support system. So, what does a male support system look like? With masculinity being the be-all and end-all to solve all problems, someone's support system may help to reinforce these negative strategies. I mean, how are men even supposed to talk to them if feelings are for pussies, right? Alright, what about outside support like a therapist? Well, this is also frowned upon. Here are some quotes from men who felt like they couldn't get help. I have to be very careful with whom I discuss the issue of being in therapy. I think there's a stigma. People expect men to be strong. A man is someone who can endure as much pain as possible without letting anyone know. You think I'm this big, tough fireman. I'm supposed to be able to deal with anything. We're self-reliant. We want to do it ourselves. Don't do it. Don't let your guard down. Be safe. As soon as you get in the hands of one of these guys, you suddenly have a whole panoply of problems you have to work through. Talk therapy is for girls, or weak people. Only sick, broken people seek advice and a safe place to talk. He also told me it was what a man needs to do, to bury his feelings and protect others from the horrors of war. With nowhere to go, disorders such as depression and anger begin to fester. The underprepared man is overwhelmed. Some men will act violently towards others, and some will act violently towards themselves. And with the risk of harassment and the pressure to assimilate to hyper-masculine culture, thoughts of suicide can begin to emerge. And what does society do for these men who commit suicide? Dude, the fuck? It is a coward. I never said anything about coward. It's a ball. It's we call them cowards. But how can someone be at fault when we foster a toxic and repressive environment? How can we condemn men who are not being taught how to deal with the stress, how to function in a healthy way in these environments? We build them up to be hollow, and then we break them. We crush them, laugh at them for not having any substance. How does society intentionally allow itself to fail men? These men aren't cowards. They were abandoned. They were scared. And that's not on them. That's on us. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I want you to keep an eye out for a film called The Mask You Live In by the Representation Project. It also discusses the effects of toxic masculinity on men. So stick with me, and next time we'll be exploring even more people that society fails. This has been Finny T. Bye!